Question 1. The diagram shows human skin. Identify the parts labeled B and C. B and C. Okay, so B is the blood vessel and C is the sweat gland that releases sweat in our skin. B is the blood vessel and C is the sweat gland. Okay, so moving on. Describe how part B is involved in maintaining a constant body temperature when the external temperature drops. Okay, so B is the blood vessel and it actually narrows, its radius decreases so that less blood flows and to retain maximum heat. This is also called vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction occurs decreasing the blood flow in blood vessels and retain heat. Part A is unevenly distributed in human skin. Name part A and suggest reason for uneven distribution. Okay, so part A is receptor or the nerve endings that detects touch, pain, pressure and temperature changes. Okay, so part A is receptor. It detects touch, pressure, pain and temperature. It is unevenly distributed because it is present in more in exposed areas that need more sensitivity. They are present in exposed areas that need more sensitivity. The thickness of layer D can change over several months. Suggest and explain one reason for a decrease in the thickness. Okay, so layer D is the adipose tissue. Its main purpose is for insulation and it actually decreases when a person exercises more or eats less food. So layer D is adipose tissue. The thickness decreases after exercise or eating less food. A man decides to do some fitness training to improve his ability to provide oxygen to his muscles. Describe the route an oxygen molecule takes from the atmosphere to reach the muscles. Okay, so first the air enters our body through our nasal passages, which is our nose. Then it passes the larynx and the trachea. Then it travels to the alveoli present in our lungs. In the alveoli, the oxygen diffuses through the thin alveolar walls, diffuses across the alveolar walls into the blood. From there, the blood is then pumped by the heart through our arteries to the muscles in our body. You will get 1 mark for mentioning how air enters our body, the explaining the passageway, that is through our nasal passages, the larynx and trachea. Then you will get 1 mark to mention how it travels to our alveoli. One mark for the passageway and 1 mark for mentioning alveoli. Next, you will get 1 mark for explaining how oxygen diffuses into our blood through the alveolar wall. This whole statement grants us 1 mark. And finally, explaining how it is pumped by the heart through our arteries to the muscles, you will get 1 mark for this. So in total, 4 marks for this question. The fitness training is designed to result in changes to the man's body, such as 2 body changes that would improve his ability to provide oxygen to his muscles. So firstly, it increases the lung capacity, and it increases, but you can also write that it improves the blood supply to our heart muscles, and that cardiac muscles are able to pump more blood in each cardiac cycle. You can write any of these points. The man measures how much oxygen his body uses, his oxygen consumption at different intensities of exercise from rest to high intensity. His results are shown in the graph. So exercise intensity is on the x-axis and oxygen consumption on the y-axis. State the name of the chemical process that uses oxygen to release energy in the muscles. So the process that releases energy in the presence of oxygen is called aerobic respiration. Use the graph to determine the maximum volume of oxygen the man consumes in 1 minute. So we can see on the graph the maximum amount is around 3.4 decimeter cube. The graph shows that it is possible for the man to reach the intensity of his increase the intensity of his exercise beyond the point at which he has reached his maximum oxygen consumption. He can only do this for a short period of time. Explain why. So a person can increase the intensity of his exercise through anaerobic respiration, which is the respiration in the absence of oxygen to release energy. The person respires anaerobically in the absence of oxygen to release energy. After 4 weeks of fitness training, the man measures his oxygen consumption again on the graph. Sketch a line to show the expected results of successful fitness training. So the oxygen consumption at rest would be the same as before, but the overall oxygen consumption at high intensity would increase. The new line would look something like this. Question 3. A gardener grows a species of dahlia, a flowering plant. Each year the gardener chooses his best plant and takes cutting to make new plants. So the shoots are cut and their lower leaves removed. The cut ends are placed into well-watered soil and covered by a transparent plastic bag. Removing the lower leaves and placing the cuttings in a transparent bag helps prevent them wilting until the root develops. Suggest and explain how these two steps help to prevent wilting. Removal of lower leaves. Stomata are present in the lower leaves on the lower side, so removal of lower leaves will reduce the surface area and reduce the number of stomata present to reduce transpiration. Covering with transparent bag, this will increase the humidity. There will be more water particles in the air to reduce water loss. One mark for this point and 2 marks for these 2 points to mention humidity and water loss, for a total of 3 marks. Taking cuttings is an commercial application of asexual reproduction. Define asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is the production of genetically identical offspring through mitosis. Genetically identical offsprings through mitosis. One mark for mentioning genetically identical offsprings and 1 mark for mentioning mitosis. The stems of the dahlia cuttings contain xylem vessels. Describe 2 functions of xylem vessels in young stems of dahlias. For each function, explain one way in which xylem structure is adapted for this function. So we have to mention the function and then the adaptation. Xylem vessels transport water and minerals. How? It has a long, hollow and thin tube without the cytoplasm. Second function would be that xylem provides mechanical support to the plant because it has hard lignified walls. The gardener's dahlia cuttings grown to full-sized plants with flowers. The gardener decides that he would like to produce a plant that combines the disease-resistant characteristic of one of these plants with the red petal color of another. With reference to named parts of flower, describe how he could achieve this. The gardener can do this by artificial selection, which starts with selective breeding. The gardener will select the desired pollen from one plant and transfer it to the stigma of another plant. To the stigma of another plant. Next, pollination occurs following fertilization. The resulting seeds are grown. And only the plants with the correct characteristics are selected. Offspring showing the best combination of characteristics are selected. This is a 5-mark question. 1 mark is for mentioning artificial selection with selective breeding. Then 1 mark for desired pollen from anther of one plant. 1 mark for this. Transferred to the stigma of another plant. 1 mark is for this point. Pollination and fertilization grants us 1 mark each. So just mentioning the name would give us a mark. And resulting seeds are grown. This will give us a mark. Resulting seeds are grown. And mentioning that the correct offspring is chosen. This will also give us a mark. Total of 7 points, but you can write any 5 to get full marks for this question. Question 4. The human liver contains a high concentration of enzymes called transaminases. These enzymes are important in the metabolism of amino acids. Amino acids are absorbed from the alimentary canal and carried to the liver by a blood vessel. Name the part of the alimentary canal where absorption occurs and the blood vessel that carries the amino acid to the liver. So the part of the alimentary canal is ileum or the small intestine, and the blood vessel is the hepatic portal vein. Part B. There are different types of transaminase. Each type has a specific active site. Explain why this means that each type catalyzes a specific reaction. In this question, we will explain the lock and key hypothesis. The lock and key hypothesis explains the substrate's shape is complementary to the active site of the enzyme is complementary to the enzyme Only the correct shape, only the correct shaped molecule fits and binds. So for 1 mark for mentioning lock and key model, second mark for the substrate shape, mentioning that it is complementary to the enzyme's active site, and 1 mark for this point, that it fits and binds. 3 marks in total. Question 5. A plant species live in pond. The diagram shows the whole plant and a section through one of its leaves. The leaves are adapted to float on the surface of the water, suggests one advantage to the plant of the leaves floating on the surface of water. So because the leaf is on the surface of the water, it will get more carbon dioxide and more sunlight, as there is nothing above it and it is not underwater. So it will be receiving more carbon dioxide and light for photosynthesis. Name the parts labeled A and B. So the A is stoma or stomata. We can see the guard cells and the opening. So A is stoma, and B is the air spaces, airspace where the gaseous exchange occurs in a leaf. With reference to parts A and B, describe and explain how the structure of the leaf is adapted to a pond environment. Stomata is present on the upper surface of the leaf. This is where the air enters and leaves. The stomata is present on the top, not the bottom like usual, because it is on the surface of the water. And the large air spaces present allow the leaf to float on the surface. Are present, which allows the leaf to float. The first 2 points are for stomata, and the last 2 points are for airspace. A total of 4 points, but you can write any 3. A plant is a part of a food web in a pond. State its trophic level. So we know that plants are the producers. We are going to write producers, or first trophic level. Question 6. There are many different types of virus that can infect animal cells. Compare the structure of a typical virus with a typical animal cell. In this question, we are going to discuss the similarity and differences between them. There is only one similarity between them, that they both contain genetic materials. We can write that virus is smaller than animal cell, and animal cell has a cell membrane. A virus has a protein coat, and animal cell has a nucleus. An animal cell contains cytoplasm and other organelles. Okay, so 1 mark is for the similarity, and then 1 mark for each point, which is virus is smaller than animal cell. 1 mark for this. Animal cell has a cell membrane. This is a mark. Virus has a protein coat, and animal cell has a nucleus. This is also a mark. Animal cell contains cytoplasm and other cell organelles. Another mark, but you can write any 4. Human immunodeficiency virus HIV is one type of virus. Describe how HIV is transmitted. So we all know HIV is a STD and it is sexually transmitted or via blood. HIV is sexually transmitted. through blood, sharing non-sterilized needles, and from mother to child when breastfeeding or across the placenta in pregnancy. So 1 mark is for telling that it is sexually transmitted, 1 mark is for tell that it is transferred through blood, sharing needle, and mother to baby across placenta as a mark, and during birth or pregnancy as a mark. A total of 5 points, but you can write any 3. The table shows the number of people infected with HIV globally and the numbers receiving treatment in different years. So we can see the years and the million of people infected with HIV and the million of people receiving treatment for HIV. Use the information in the table to describe changes in the number of people infected and treated between the years 2000 and 2018. So we have to describe the changes, which means we have to describe the table. You can see the number of people infected has also increased, and as well as the million of people treated. We are going to start with number of infected people has increased from 2000 to 2018. We can also write the values to support the data. And number of people receiving treatment have also increased from 2000 to 2018. And a much bigger proportion of those treated were increased. We can use the data from the table to support this. Like, we are going to calculate the percent of people treated in 2000, which was 3%, and the percent of people treated in 2018, which was 61%. We have used the data in the table to support our answer. So we are going to write in 2000 only 3% were treated, but in 2018 over 60% were treated. 3 marks in total. 1 mark is to just state that number of infected increased. 1 mark for the number of HIV treated was increased. And the last part was this: much bigger proportion of those infected were treated. In 2000 only 3% were treated, but in 2018 over 60% were treated. Question 7. The diagram shows a section through a molar tooth of a human. So this is a human tooth with enamel, dentine, and the pulp made of living tissue. State the function of a molar tooth. So we know the molar is present for crushing and grinding of food. We are going to write crushing or grinding of food. The pulp is a living tissue. Describe the movement of molecules in the pulp between the blood capillaries and the cytoplasm of the surrounding cells. In this part, we have to describe how the molecules move from the pulp to the blood capillaries. At the capillary bed, blood is under pressure, which means it is a bit slow. It's thin, 1 cell thick, so it can easily diffuse through the walls that allow soluble materials like oxygen and glucose to squeeze out into the tissue fluid, while the waste like carbon dioxide diffuses in. Carbon dioxide and urea to diffuse in. So 1 mark for just mentioning the capillary bed, 1 mark to state that blood is under pressure, 1 mark for the 1 cell thick wall, and 1 mark for the movement of oxygen and glucose into the tissue fluid, and 1 mark for CO2 and urea to diffuse into the blood. You can write any 4 points. Part B. Toothache is caused by inflammation of the pulp tissue and is often a sign of dental decay. Tooth decay occurs because of bacteria and it can be prevented through brushing and flossing. So bacteria feeds on sugar present on our tooth, on our teeth. and produces acid which destroys our enamel. It can be prevented by brushing teeth and avoiding sugary food. Can also be prevented by flossing or going to the dentist. You can write any of these points. Just 5 points for this question. 1 mark for mentioning bacteria, 1 mark for that it feeds on sugar and produces acid, 1 mark for this point. It destroys the enamel and it can be prevented by brushing teeth or avoiding sugar or any of those precautions. Question 8. The functions of the body are coordinated by nerve impulses and hormones. Compare these two types of coordination. So we have to write the similarities and differences between them. There is only one similarity, that they both act on a specific effectors. Everything else is different between them. Nerve impulses are faster, short term, they have a short term effect. We are going to write all these differences in this question. Both trigger responses on specific effectors. Nerve impulses are faster than hormones. Nerve impulses are electrical while hormones are chemical. Nerve impulses have a short-term effect, they are short-lived, and while hormones have a long-term effect. 4 points for this question. 1 mark for similarity, and then 1 mark for 3 differences each. First difference is that they are faster, nerve impulses are faster. Second difference is that they are electrical while hormones are chemical. And the last difference was nerve impulses are short-lived while hormones have a long-term effect. A total of 4 marks. Part B. A girl sees a vehicle traveling towards her at a speed. As she crosses the road, this triggers nerve impulses and the release of adrenaline in her body. Describe the role of the nerve impulses and adrenaline helping her to react to this situation. So we are going to tell how the nervous system and how the hormone system helps her to react in this situation. First, nervous system. 3 points for this. Eye receptor sends impulses through sensory neuron, 1 point. Via relay neuron to motor neuron. This is the passageway for the impulses. 3 points for nervous. I have written 4, but you can write any 3. And then we are going to discuss the hormone system. Adrenaline from the adrenal glands travels in our blood to heart, which causes it to beat faster. 3 points for the hormone. A total of 6 points. Question 9. The world produces over 100 million tons of nitrogen containing fertilizer annually. Farmers spread this artificial fertilizer over their soil. Describe how nitrogen from the fertilizer can pass from the soil to eventually become part of the food which humans eat. So this question is asking us how nitrogen travels from fertilizer to the soil to the plants to our body. So fertilizers add ammonium to the soil, which are converted to nitrates by bacteria through nitrification. Then it enters the plant and then our diet when we eat that plant. Fertilizers add ammonium ions to the soil. Bacteria converts these ions to nitrates through nitrification, which root hairs absorb by active transport. The ions travel through xylem vessels to form plant amino acid / proteins. which are then ingested by humans. So 1 mark for fertilizer adds ammonium to the soil, 1 mark for nitrification, then 1 mark to tell how the root hair absorbs them, and 1 mark for just mentioning active transport. Then the ions travel in xylem, this has a mark to form plant amino acid / protein, and that human ingest, this will grant us a mark. A total 7 points, but you can write any 5. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the use of artificial nitrogen containing fertilizers. So the advantages are that fertilizers actually replace the nitrogen in the soil which are used by crops. This increased yield and growth. Now the disadvantages, that it degrades the soil, it reduces biodiversity and causes eutrophication, which is the depletion of oxygen in the water for marine life. Also called water pollution. 1 mark for fertilizer replace nitrogen removed by crop, 1 mark for boosting growth and yield, 1 mark for degrades soil, another mark for reduces biodiversity, and last mark for causes eutrophication. A total of 5 points.